Lecture 14, Man and His Relationship to God. Our topic of discussion this hour is Man and His Relationship to God. Here, the Doctrine and Covenants make some superb contributions. Let me just begin by stating what I would call 4 basic facts pertaining to life, which are derived from Scripture. 1. The elements are eternal. They are just as old as God. That is a view in the whole Christian world that is distinct and unique. The Catholic world doesn't believe that. The Protestant world doesn't believe that. But in section 93, the Lord says the elements are eternal. The second one, the primal life of man is as old as God. Section 93, verse 29. You were also in the beginning with God. Intelligences, or the light of truth. It's talking about the primal life of man. It was not created, neither indeed can be. So primal life is as old as God, and primal life within my being, what I would call the central primal intelligence or the primal ego within me and within you, is just as old as your Father in heaven and is eternal. It goes out to a time without beginning. Point 3, we belong to the family of God. He is the Father of our spirits, and a genealogical line, and a genealogical line of our flesh goes back to the man of holiness. The man of holiness is on my pedigree chart. I mean that. We are part of an eternal family, and all aspects of that family center in God. You talk about the creation of Adam, and you get this not only in the book of Luke, but you get this specifically in the Pearl of Great Price, that Adam was a son of God. You have men like President Joseph Fielding Smith who have stated clearly on that, and others. The prophet Joseph Smith, in fact, I don't know very many major LDS minds who haven't in some measure made statements on that fact. Number 4, the vital requirements in order to sustain life is found in section 93, verse 30. It's one of the greatest statements of Scripture. When the Savior was on the earth teaching the Jews, he took the whole Scripture and synthesized and brought it down into 2 basic commandments. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy might, mind, and soul, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And then he said, upon these 2 commandments hang all the laws and the prophets. They are a synthesis, a bringing down, a reducing of all things down to 2 basic fundamentals. This statement in section 93 does the same kind of thing in relation to the orderly cosmos and organized life in all forms and degrees. It says this: all truth is independent in that sphere in which God has placed it, to act for itself as all intelligence also. Otherwise, there is no existence. Now, in order for truth and intelligence to be independent, certain things are required. First of all, law must be ordained. Secondly, that law must be known. Thirdly, there must be an opposition in all things. Fourthly, after the law is ordained, after it is known, after the opposition exists, there must be agency. The principle of agency, the right of choice between obedience and disobedience, between life and death. Finally, fifthly, maturely, the given form of life And that applies to microscopic life as well as macroscopic. The given form of life must obey the law that's given. And when that law is decreed, when that law is known, and where there is an opposition, when there is agency, and when there is obedience, under those conditions, all truth and intelligence becomes independent. They are independent in the sphere in which God has placed them to act for themselves and not to be acted upon. Otherwise, there is no existence. You cannot coddle a person into the celestial kingdom, and you cannot keep a child tied to your apron strings forever, and you cannot dominate the life of another person. Instead, as Joseph Smith would do it, you teach them correct principles and they govern themselves. And if they govern themselves all right, then they are independent in the sphere in which they live. That's one of the great fundamental truths of all existence. And when we have it here in the Doctrine and Covenants, it appears clear across the board, way across the board from primal life, clear on up through the first estate and on into the celestial world. It applies clear across the board. All truth and all intelligence are independent in the sphere in which God has placed them to act for themselves, etc. Otherwise, there is no existence. We want to pick up the picture of life in its vast drama as revealed in the Scriptures. I want to focus today on section 93, which is, in my estimation, the greatest statement in existence defining the relationship of man and God. In the revelation, in Doctrine and Covenants, it is without superior. It stands even in some respects above in importance many other revelations. It's just the revelation par excellence in the Doctrine and Covenants, revealing the knowledge of man and what things are all about. It's here in section 93 that we learn about the primal life of man. There is nowhere else in the Scriptures teaches us anything directly about the primal life of man. In the book of Abraham, chapter 3, Abraham says, I, Abraham, saw the intelligences that were organized before the world was. The word intelligence, there is not a term as used by Abraham meaning the primal life. The word intelligences is a synonym for organized spirits. If you read the statement carefully, you will see that is self-explanatory within his statement. He says, Now the Lord has shown unto me, Abraham, the intelligences that were organized before the world was. And among all these were many noble and great ones. And God saw these souls that they were good. And he stood in the midst of them, and he said, These I will make my rulers, for he stood amongst those that were spirits. So intelligences were organized spirits. In a full scope program of life, there was a period of existence before we became organized spirit children of our Father in heaven. The place it speaks of that is here in section 93, verse 29. Man was also in the beginning with God, intelligence or light of truth. And note, it gives a synonym to it. This intelligence he calls the light of truth was not created or made, neither indeed can be. Now that's the primal life of man. And it is only mentioned there. There are certain inherent things within that statement. Let me just go back and give you some comments by the prophet Joseph and other men who were close to him, who learned what they knew from him in order to kind of elaborate, if I can, on this. Not in the sense of theorizing, but in the sense of giving you a few statements by men who were taught through the prophet Joseph Smith. One person was Party P. Pratt. I take this from the Keys of Theology, which is one of the very, very few books published officially by the church. It's a tremendous little statement. It's one of those works when I was a kid, 16 or 17 years old. I sneaked it out of my dad's library and carried it around in my back pocket, almost memorizing it. It just had some tremendous things in it. He says, page 49, 1948 edition, first, there has always existed a boundless infinitude of space. That's point one. Point two, intermingled with this space, there exists all the varieties of the elements, properties, or things of which intelligence takes cognizance, which elements or things take altogether compose what is called the universe. Now, there is Party P. Pratt's description of the universe. Third, the elements of all these properties or things are eternal, uncreated, self-existing. Not one particle can be added to them by creative power. Neither can one article be diminished or annihilated. It's the fourth principle that I want to come to.
These elements, self-existing elements, possess in themselves certain inherent properties, that is, of life, or attributes, in a greater or lesser degree. Let me see if we can see what he is saying. You take a given element, and let's just draw a circle up here and say that that is a given element, blown up big enough so we can see it clear back there. Can you folks in the back see it? Fine. In the midst of that circle, you draw a plus sign. The plus represents the element, the substance, the individual element or substance, and let the plus sign represent a principle of life that is inherent in that substance. How old is that element or that circle? It's eternal. And how old is the inherent principle of life that's within it? It's eternal. The inherent principle of life is that which we call intelligence or light of truth. It gets to this basic idea that we are living in a living universe. That's true of all elements, physical, gross elements, as well as spirit. But there's two major divisions of the gross elements and the spirit element. In that kind of matter that we call spirit, in particular, there is inherent principle of life to a greater or more intense degree. Joseph Smith taught that light, life, and the spirit are one. That's an exact quote. Light, life, and spirit are one. The spirit is substance. There is an element of life. It's called the light of truth. It shines, so there is a radiance associated with it. For example, here in section 88, the Lord talks to us about the earth. He says, verse 25, "And again, verily I say unto you, the earth abideth the law of the celestial kingdom, for it filleth the measure of its creation, and transgresseth not the law. The earth is alive. Wherefore it shall be sanctified. Yea, notwithstanding it shall die, it shall be quickened again, and shall abide the power by which it is quickened, and the righteous shall inherit it." Let me make this clarification. Lehi talks about things that are organized to act and things that are organized to be acted upon. Let me suggest to you that those things that are organized to act, that have the sufficient inherent properties of life within them to be able to act, are those that are formed from spirit. This purifying substance which the prophet equates with life, light, and spirit. And those things that have enough life within them to be acted upon, but not enough to act themselves. These are those things that pertain to the physical. The physical body has a tabernacle within it, an organized spirit. That spirit is organized to act. The physical body can be acted upon. It has enough life to respond, to interact. But when you take the spirit out, what happens? It can't sustain itself, and it disintegrates and goes back to native element. In the broad scope of things, then there is this type of matter we call spirit, but inherent within it, as Party P. Pratt says, and let me read you his statement again. These eternal self-existing elements possess in themselves certain inherent properties, that is, of life or attributes in greater or lesser degree. There is a continuum situation, and in the realm of spirit, you get more. So when God creates something, he starts in the realm of spirit. Then you go through the first estate, and those who keep their first estate can be added upon. And the adding upon is to give the more gross organization, the physical body. And it's important to have it because it's only when spirit and element are inseparably connected, not just in mortality, we're not separately connected. You get run over by an automobile and you find that one out. But in the resurrection, your spirit and body will be inseparably connected, and only then can you receive a fullness. But in that process of connecting things inseparably, the physical, it is raised to the celestial plane through the power of the gospel, and this is where sanctification comes in, and the power of the Spirit which infuses life and truth within the being. They prepare that physical organism. They act upon it. They transform. They transfuse power into it. Then those elements, having thus been acted upon, when they are united with Spirit in the resurrection, are raised to the purity and to the intelligence and power of the Spirit. So the physical body is spoken of as a spiritual body. Section 88, verse 27, notwithstanding they die, they shall be raised again a spiritual body. Or as Amulek says in Alma 11:45, I have spoken to you concerning the death of this mortal body, and also concerning the resurrection of this mortal body. This mortal body is raised from death to life, that they can die no more, their spirits united with their bodies, never to be divided, thus the whole becoming spiritual and immortal, that they can no more see corruption. You can't get a fullness of joy with the spirit associated with a physical mortal body, and you can't get a fullness of joy with the spirit associated with the physical elements in the celestial glory. If you want a fullness of joy, you've got to meet that challenge of getting a physical body and subduing and sanctifying it and preparing it for a glorious resurrection, which is the great purpose of mortality. Coming back to the subject of primal intelligence, here is Party P. Pratt again. Intelligence is an inherent attribute of the eternal element called spirit. What has he said? Let's go back to this circle up here. That's the element. There's a plus sign in it symbolizing the inherent attribute. How old is that element? Eternal. How old is the inherent attribute? If it's inherent, it's eternal. When you talk about the primal life of man, you are talking about that plus thing in there. You are talking about the life that's inherent in spirit. Section 93 says, for man is spirit, not man is a spirit. That's true also, but man is spirit. The substance of life that gives me being is organized spirit with its inherent properties of life. Here is the prophet Joseph Smith in the Great King Follett Funeral Sermon, he says, Teachings, page 353, is it logical to say that the intelligence of spirit is immortal, and yet that the primal intelligence within spirit, had a beginning? The intelligence of spirit had no beginning, neither will it have an end. He is talking about the inherent principle. Again, the mind or intelligence which man possesses is co-eternal, or co-equal with God himself. Here's Brigham Young. The life that is within us is a part of an eternity of life. It is organized spirit. Do you get that? It's organized spirit, which is clothed upon by tabernacles, thereby constituting a present being which is designed for the attainment of further intelligence. Journal of Discourse 7, 285. Here is Orson Pratt. There was dwelling in each of the tabernacles of Adam and Eve a personage of spirit, formed of more refined materials than flesh and bone, materials that were intelligent, immortal, and eternal. Journal of Discourse 7, 254 to 255. Then here's another one from Elder Pratt. Some suppose that all our intelligence is in the head. Others question whether we've got any in there at all. I do not believe such a thing, but I believe that if our spirits could be taken from our bodies and stand before us so that we could gaze upon them with our natural eyes, we could see the likeness and image of each of the tabernacles out of which we were taken. Not only the head, but the figure of the head, feet, arms, hands, face, and all the whole body. If the spirit is composed of innumerable particles, and that's the point you need to see now, if the spirit is composed of innumerable particles possessing knowledge or intelligence, we argue that it is diffused through the system in which it dwells. For if the parts of the spirit had individually no knowledge, then they would not have any knowledge collectively. Journal Discourse 2, page 341. Let me put it this way. In what form and stature is the organized spirit? Jesus appeared to the brother of Jared and said, "The body that ye now behold is the body of my spirit." How did he look? Did he have 2 hands? He did. Did he have legs? He did. Did he have a head? He did. He was a male spirit, right? And he was in form and stature as a spirit. And that stature is the form and stature that the spirit gives to the physical body. So it therefore looks like the physical body, except as Jesus said when he appeared to his disciples and they were about ready to bolt through the wall for fear, he said, "Handle me and see, for the spirit hath not flesh and bones, as ye see me have, or I'm in the form and stature." But there's that difference. If you've got a spirit body, and that spirit body has a little finger, what's that little finger made out of? It's made out of particles of spirit. And if each particle of spirit has inherent within it a property of life, then is there any life in my little finger? Yes. Is that true for my next finger? And of the next one? Is that true of my arms, of my legs? Somewhere in that organization is what I call a CPI, Central Primal Intelligence. The spirit body is organized out of spirit element. Each element possesses and inherent within it are properties of life. And the whole of that organism centered in and placed under the direction of the central primal intelligence,
which I say is the basic ego of my life. That's me. But that basic ego, when it is organized as a spirit, now has command of its own little universe. It has become of this spirit body, and things are organized in such a way so that there is a union between the central primal intelligence and the organized body, so that they respond and they get benefit from those. Can you see generally what I'm trying to say? The organization of the spirit, first of all, it took place through what process? It took place within the covenant of eternal marriage and by the process of conception and birth. This is what eternal marriage in the resurrection is basically all about. At least this is a basic part of what it's all about. Our Father in heaven and Mother in heaven begot us. And somehow in the marital union, our Mother in heaven conceived. The primal intelligence is infused and implanted within her celestial womb. Can I put it that way? The other elements of the Spirit are brought in, and that process is not a tabernacling process where the Spirit already exists in form and it goes through a process of getting a physical tabernacle. That conception and birth process is an organization process. Abraham says, "Now the Lord had shown unto me the intelligences that were organized." There are 3 different basic birth processes in the divine plan. The first is an organizational process where we get the spirit body and where elements of spirit are organized subordinate to and unified with a central primal intelligence that has sufficient quality and capability of mind to run the program and to have the benefits of expressing itself now with hands and legs and a mouth and eyes. This is a tremendous benefit to it, opening the door of progress and development. As the Lord says in the Pearl of Great Price, He gave them their knowledge in the day of creation. It gives them the power over and above the inherent and innate properties they had. The second kind of birth, then, is a tabernacling process, and we're acquainted with that in mortality. That's where, under the Lord's law, within the marriage relationship, a woman conceives, and that spirit of that woman, as President Clark once suggested in his talk at the BYU, somehow has the capability and had to learn this as part of the first estate, how to take that basic embryo that's formed in conception and develop it to the point where the spirit body can come in and take possession and direction of it. That's one of the interesting things. We don't know too much about it, but at least there is a time between conception and when the spirit body enters in. But when that spirit body enters into that embryo, the spirit being has already formed. He or she is a mature spirit of full stature, alive and has been alive for at least a couple of billion years, longer than that probably, from what the prophet Joseph Smith once said. God creates a spirit world and puts the physical world on it. Then the spirit world becomes the foundation for the physical world. So you have a birth and a development of the physical organism, and that's important. That's part of the great plan of life. Then the third stage of life, the third birth process, is a birth of water, symbolic of physical birth. Through Christ and through His atonement, by which we get the remission of sins and by which the powers of truth and light that were conceived in Christ, centered in Him by conception, are extended to us through adoption. Christ, as the Son of God, acquires these divine powers by conception.
He didn't have to be baptized. He didn't have to have the laying on of hands. He was sinless, and the powers of the Spirit that we get through the laying on of hands was centered in him in conception. And he is the Son of God, and through getting these powers through baptism, Joseph Smith calls it through the articles of adoption, then we have the right to come to the same kind of relationship to the life that he had. We have the challenge to not only retain the remission of sins, but to grow from grace to grace until finally we get the powers of glory in their fullness. Spirit birth then was an organization after we were born on that sphere on which our Father in heaven dwells, and that's not Kolob, it's where he dwells, wherever he dwells. Then we were nurtured for a time in the immediate environs of our heavenly parents. Having been nurtured for some time, Parley P. Pratt puts it, spirit worlds were created and were transplanted, or we were transplanted and took place on one of those spirit worlds. That's where the first estate took place. We were put on a spirit world with no veil between us and God, and we grew and developed on that spirit world. That's on that spirit world that the war in heaven took place. We didn't tear up the front room of the fathers or rummage around in the backyard or anything like that. The war in heaven took place in our first estate. But at that time, we were living on a spirit world that had been created. Then we were placed under the direction of a spirits who had grown and developed and who had pris navus. The lower floor was taken up with the regular mercantile activities. The upper part of the building was the 47th East South Temple of the church. In that day, it was church headquarters. It consisted of a large room with a little cubbyhole over the side. The prophet took a system of wires and strung them across, and then curtains, and divided them into compartments and made of it a miniature temple. Because the temple hadn't been constructed, the Lord prompted him to administer these programs even before the temple was finished. So he divided that room into compartments, and then had some of the brethren who were there, and we have some of their journals telling what they did on it. He had some of the brethren decorate those rooms. He had a creation room, he had a garden room, and he had a world room or a terrestrial room. Then he hung up a veil, and this was the physical setting for what he is talking about here. They had all that done a day or two before by these brethren who had received instructions from Joseph Smith to do it. He tells us then what he did. I instructed them in the principles and order of the priesthood, attending to washing, anointings, endowments, and the communication of keys pertaining to the Aaronic priesthood. And we all know what that means if we've been through the temple. And so on to the highest order of the Melchizedek priesthood. Now, what is the highest order? What is it given in the temple? He says, setting forth the order, and order means system or program, setting forth the order pertaining to the Ancient of Days, and all those plans and principles by which anyone, not just the brethren, anyone, is enabled to secure the fullness of those blessings, which have been prepared for the church of the firstborn, and come up and abide in the presence of Elohim. In other words, Elohim has more than one connotation. Basically and intrinsically, it means God's. El is God, and Him is the plural of gods. But we assign it as a name title to man of holiness. it can be appropriately assigned as a name title to Christ also, because he has the fullness of the Father. But for purposes of designation, because the Father embodies all of that and represents all of that, we call him Elohim. Here the prophet uses it. He says, "And come up and abide in the presence of Elohim." He means the gods in the eternal worlds. He says, "In this council was instituted the ancient order of things for the first time in the last days." What is the ancient order of things? Well, who is the person that we call Ancient of Days? Adam. And the order of things that he is the center of, that order is the eternal family order consisting of all who have been born again into the family of Jesus Christ. When a person is born into the family of Jesus Christ, they are not organized horizontally, number one son, number 2, 3, on down. They are organized patriarchally, so that Adam, under Christ, becomes father of all those who are born. The idea is that Adam becomes not only the father physically, in the sense of progeny, physical progeny, but he becomes the father also spiritually, in the sense that under Christ, he is the means by which people are introduced into the family of Christ. And then under Christ, he, Adam, presides over his reborn family. And this, then, is the family of the Holy Order. Note how the prophet Joseph Smith explains it in Teachings, page 167. Commencing with Adam, who was the first man, who is spoken of in Daniel as being Ancient of Days, or in other words, the first and oldest of all, the great grand progenitor, of whom it is said in other places he is Michael, because he, and note why he was, because he was the first and father of all, not only by progeny, but the first to hold the spiritual blessings, to whom was made known the plan of ordinances for the salvation of his posterity to the end, and to whom Christ was first revealed, and through whom Christ has been revealed from heaven, and will continue to be revealed from henceforth. The order pertaining to the Ancient of Days, then, is a family order, but not merely of the nuclear family. It's not merely the family order in the sense of the flesh. Rather, it is the family under Christ. It's the family consisting of those who are born again. Adam was the first one to be so reborn on earth, and we have the record of that in the book of Moses. And then he went to the temple, and he received these ordinances, and he, in the sacred ordinances of the house of the Lord, became a father, not only physical, such as he was, but a father under Christ, of the priesthood rights and powers, of the powers of rebirth, of the newness of life of which the gospel consists. He became the father of this. The great challenge, then, was not merely to beget children in physical posterity, but to bring them as the next step into the family of Christ, to be born again, and then to become his children spiritually. So he is the great head and father of all, not only by physical progeny, but the first to hold the spiritual blessings. We see this with Abraham. As we know, he, through the great mercy of the Lord and the testing of his faith, he and Sarai became the head of the elect posterity that had been foreordained to perpetuate the holy order from his day down through. Abraham had a real challenge to go through in regards to those things, and he sought for his priesthood. But when he received those blessings, then he was told that all those who were born again after his day would be his children. Let me turn to the
Book of Abraham, chapter 2, verse 9. The Lord says to Abraham, "And I will make thee a great nation, and I will bless thee above measure, and make thy name great among all nations. And thou shalt be a blessing unto thy seed after thee, that in their hands they shall bear this ministry and priesthood unto all nations." Now note verse 10 very carefully. "And I will bless them through thy name, for as many as receive this gospel shall be called after thy name, and shall be accounted thy seed, and shall raise up and bless thee as their father." So, from Abraham's day on down through, anyone who goes through the process of rebirth, who is baptized and receives the Holy Ghost, and who puts off a natural man and becomes a son or a daughter of Jesus Christ, regardless of what bloodline they are born in mortality, that person is called a child of Abraham and will be part of Abraham's celestial and eternal family. So he is called the father of the faithful, and he is a father two ways instead of one. He is a father of physical progeny, and under Christ and under the patriarchs above and back to Adam, he is a father of all those who are born again and become sons and daughters of Jesus Christ in the sacred program that we call the Holy Order of God. When we go to the temple and we receive the basic foundation things in what we call the initiatory ordinances, and then blooming out of those things into sacred ordinances of the Holy Endowment, and finally, having passed through the veil, go to one of the sacred sealing rooms and there kneel over the altar and receive the covenant of eternal marriage, we then are giving the blessings. Then we are given the blessings of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So a man who is married in the temple becomes a junior Abraham. Can I put it that way? And his wife is a junior Sarai. The thing that sets temple marriage off and makes it distinct is not merely that it's going to last forever. Many of those sacred ordinances will not last forever. But the thing that really sets them off and makes them last forever is because you have the responsibility to be a father and a mother two ways instead of one. That's the thing that really counts. Then you correlate that with home evening. You correlate that with fulfilling priesthood responsibilities. What does it mean if you are an Abraham and you are home and you are supposed to be the father of the faithful, and you are supposed to be a father of your children spiritually under Christ? What does that mean as it translates out into home evening? What does that mean when it comes to instilling within your children a testimony of Christ? What does that mean in the sense of our responsibility to come up and receive those blessings, and to have our children receive those blessings, and to help them in the great process of being born into the family of Christ, and help them prepare for the temple, and help them after they've been married in the temple to consolidate their lives on these sacred covenants that they've received, and finally to come up and receive a fullness of priesthood. That kind of thing is the idea of receiving a fullness of the priesthood. That kind of thing is the idea of temple marriage. And it goes back to the idea of Adam, who is called the Ancient of Days because he is the father not only physically, but under Christ. He is the father of all those who are born again. And similarly, Abraham has those rights and those appointments. That, then, is the idea of this program that centers on or in the temple, which the scriptures call the Holy Order, and which we sometimes nickname Holy Patriarchal Order. That means that Adam and others of his day had their temple rights. Sometimes we get the idea that they didn't. If you turn to the Pearl of Great Price for a minute and just briefly look at this thing that we call facsimile number 2, and read a few things in it, figure 3, it is made to represent God. The prophet Joseph Smith says, sitting upon his throne, clothed with power and authority, with the crown of eternal light upon his head, representing all the grand key words of the holy priesthood. In other words, we're talking about the temple, the grand keywords of the holy priesthood as revealed to Adam in the Garden of Eden, as also to Seth, Noah, Melchizedek, Abraham, and all to whom the priesthood was revealed. And then figure 7, representing God sitting upon his throne, revealing through the heavens the grand keyword of the priesthood. Figure 8 contains writings that cannot be revealed unto the world, but is to be had in the holy temples of God. The prophet Joseph Smith received much of the temple ceremony from the book of Abraham. He got it, in turn, from the patriarchs, back of him all the way back through to Adam. So when we talk about the ancient people, we need to understand that they had temples of the Lord. Here in section 124, the prophet is telling us about temples and the need to establish them. In verse 39, the latter part of the verse, he says, "These things are ordained by the ordinances of my holy house, which my people are always commanded to build unto my holy name." The Lord's people are always commanded to be a temple people. President Benson, in his classic statement that we read from, and let me suggest that you just really reread that one, makes reference to this divine order being established in the days of Adam and coming down by descent from Adam and Seth and Canaan and Enos, Mahalalel, and many other great patriarchs. He is reading from section 107. Let me turn there with you for a minute, beginning with verse 40. He has been talking about patriarchs and then says this: "The order of this priesthood, that is, the order of the priesthood to which the office of patriarch belongs." Let me just make a clarification, make a point at this stage in our discussion. There are two kinds of patriarchs. The ancient patriarchs like Adam and Enoch, and like Melchizedek, they were presiding figures. They held the keys over the family of Christ in their day. They presided as fathers spiritually. In the fullness of the priesthood, they exercised the authority of kings and priests. Melchizedek was king of Salem. And if you read the Pearl of Great Price, you'll find that Adam and Noah were kings over the earth. They were like Mosiah and Benjamin in the Book of Mormon over the world of their day. That's one kind of patriarch. The other kind is what I would call a blesser or a designator. They have the responsibility to give blessings to the saints and to declare lineage. It's just as important to get a patriarchal blessing as it is to be baptized. Why? Because you have to have an official designation in respect to the lineage in Israel to which you belong. So it's just as important to have that as it is to be baptized. Some people may take issue with that, and I'm not pressing the issue. I'm just saying that it's one of those absolute necessities. A patriarch, then, having the right to so bless people and to make that designation, is not, however, a presiding figure. No state patriarch presides anywhere. The patriarch to the church doesn't preside anywhere. He is a blesser and a designator, but he belongs to that order that was established in Adam's day. He is a figure within that order, rather than within the ecclesiastical administrative program of the church. He is a figure within the patriarchal rather than within the ecclesiastical order of priesthood. So the prophet says, speaking of patriarchs in the sense of blessers and designators, 107:40, the order of this priesthood, that is, the priesthood to which they belong, this is the holy order. The one that President Benson was talking about was confirmed to be handed down from father to son and rightfully belongs to the lineage descendants of the chosen seed, to whom the promises were made. This order was instituted in the days of Adam and came down by lineage in the following manner. From Adam to Seth, who was ordained by Adam at the age of 69 years, and it goes on. Enos was ordained at the age of 134 years. Canaan was 87 years old. I've heard people in the priesthood discussions and in gospel doctrine classes say how privileged we are to have the priesthood and to be ordained when we are at the age of 12 and be ordained elders when we get up around the age 19, etc. And these people had to wait all this time. Well, they have no concept of what this revelation is talking about. That's not talking about when they got the priesthood. It's talking about their appointment to preside as fathers under Christ over the Holy Order. It's talking about the office of presidency of the Holy Order. And Seth received this when he was 69. Enos and Canaan and Mahalaleel and Jared and Enoch, who got it when he was 25 years old, and Methuselah when he was 100 years old, when he was ordained under the hand of Adam, and Lamech was 32, and then Noah entered in and got it when he was 10 years old. He got it from Methuselah, and the reason for that is that Methuselah had a real interest in the promises that were to be given to him, and he took glory in the promises. When he found out that Noah was the right person, he didn't wait around. He gave him the keys, and he was 10 years of age when he did so. The Lord implies that Methuselah was a little bit over-enthusiastic and took a little glory to himself that he ought not to have done, having been a more humble person. But it was this body of men that Adam called together in the great council at Adam on Diamond. He says, 3 years previous to the death of Adam, he hath called Seth, Enoch, Canaan, Mahalaleel, Jared, Enoch, and Methuselah, who were all high priests, and that term high priest needs to be understood. There are different offices of the high priest in the Mosaic order that the Israelites finally got, and when it was leveled down to the lower limits that they had at the time of the Savior, there was a high priest over the Aaronic order. A priest who is a high priest is merely a priest who is high, if I can put it that way. I don't mean that sacrilegiously, but he is one who presides, and a high priest of that order and day was over the Aaronic order. Within the ecclesiastical order of the church, we have high priests. I am a high priest, for example. This is one who has a calling to preside within the ecclesiastical order. There are those who become high priests in relation to the holy order. This is the kind of thing that Abraham was concerned about and received. If you read the first chapter of the book of Abraham and study it through carefully, Abraham tells us that he had become alive and knew about the program of the Holy Order. Like President Benson said, our children ought to do. They ought to know about the temple and what the program is so that they can then seek for their blessings in the priesthood. Abraham did that, and President Benson calls attention to that fact. It says here in verse 2, chapter 1, and finding there was a greater happiness and peace and rest for me, I sought for the blessings of the fathers. Who were the fathers? Well, they were these great patriarchs that Adam called together at the council of Adam on Diamond. He sought for these blessings of the fathers. He sought for two things, the blessings of the fathers and the right whereunto I should be ordained to administer the same. So he not only wanted to receive them, he wanted the keys to give them to someone else. He says, and having been myself a follower of righteousness, desiring also to be one who possessed greater knowledge, and to be a greater follower of righteousness, and to possess a greater knowledge, and to be a father of many nations, not just physically but spiritually, a prince of peace, and desiring to receive instructions and to keep the commandments of God, I became a rightful heir, a high priest, holding the rights belonging to the fathers. What office of high priest is he talking about? The one that I hold. No. The office of high priest he was talking about was one who had the blessings of these great patriarchs, Adam, Seth, Enos, Canaan, Malhaleel, Jared, etc., and the right to preside and to give these blessings to others. That's what he sought for. Then he talks about that. He says about this office of high priest, it was conferred upon me from my fathers. It came down from the fathers, from the beginning of time, yea, even from the beginning or before the foundation of the world. The phrase foundation of the world is a scriptural term we need to understand. What are the foundations of the earth to the present time? Even the right of the firstborn or first man, who is Adam, our first father, through the fathers unto me. He is talking about the genealogy of this office of high priest that he received. He says, I sought for mine appointment unto the priesthood according to the appointment of God unto the fathers concerning the seed. See what he is saying there in that sense. And this order of things was established, and it was the ruling order in what we call the antediluvian period of the world, when Adam was about ready to depart this world, when he was 927 years of age, or somewhere in there. He called his posterity into the great and sacred council of Adam-on-Diamon, and that's the same place where that we call Adam-on-Diamon today. That's the same place where another great priesthood conference will be held, and both these conferences will be consummating conferences by which the program of God in relation to the Holy Order will be consummated for the particular period of time. They were called together there and given those blessings. We have some insight and understanding concerning these things in latter-day revelation. In section 116, the prophet writes, Adam-on-Diamon, because he said, that is the Lord, it is the place where Adam shall come to visit his people, or Ancient of Days shall sit, as spoken of by Daniel the prophet. And the reference in Daniel is Daniel chapter 7. Then here in section 117, the prophet is given a revelation to some brethren who were dallying around all over Kirtland area and were concerned about their real estate. The Lord kind of talks to them about things, getting their values straight and their priorities straight. In verse 8 he says, is there not room enough on the mountains of Adam-on-Diamon and on the plains of Olaha, Shineha, or the land where Adam dwelt, that you should covet that which is but a drop and neglect the more weightier matters? The prophet goes on and says in this Revelation section 115, talking about Far West and that general area, let the city of Far West be a holy and consecrated land, verse 7, unto me, and it shall be called most holy, for the ground upon which thou standest is holy. The prophet Joseph Smith, by revelation and vision, was given many things. I want to get more into detail on that at another time when we have the time to do so. He learned that the Garden of Eden was in Jackson County. The temple that is to be built there will stand on the spot that Adam and Eve stood on when they were driven from the Garden of Eden. He was told clearly and plainly that Adam-on-Diamon was Adam's place away from home. He traveled about 90 miles from the center place of Zion, and that's essentially where he established headquarters. The prophet taught, by some journal reports, that Abel was martyred at Far West, and that may be the reason why the Lord says, this ground is holy, it is a sacred ground. You are standing upon a sacred ground. The prophet taught that the ark was built in the Carolinas and that the city of Enoch was taken from the Gulf of Mexico when it was translated. There are good authorities on those men who were close to the prophet, and some of them became general authorities who later recounted those things. So as Latter-day Saints, we have some insight into those things as to where they transpired and what we're dealing with. There are two places in Scripture where you have historical statements concerning the Holy Order in the antediluvian period. One of them is section 107, there beginning with verse 40 and going on down through
to where it talks about Adam-on-Diamond council and indicates that Enoch is the clerk to that council, and indicates that the things that were given there are recorded, and that there will be a time when we come back to another Adam-on-Diamond council. In the second one, the records of the first will be made known, and these, as I've said, will be consummating events in the earth in the latter days. But there is another place in Scripture that deals with this historical period, and this is the book of Moses, chapter 6, 7, and 8. As you study these chapters, you'll find that they're not just the history of the world in those days. It begins talking about a book of remembrance that was kept in the language of Adam. It was given to many to write by the spirit of inspiration. Then it talks about the order of the priesthood, and that's the temple order. That's the thing that we've been talking about. Now this same period, which was in the beginning, shall be in the end of the world also. And we've got to build that up and come back to those ancient times. Then he says, this prophecy Adam spake, as he was moved upon by the Holy Ghost, and a genealogy was kept of the children of God. This genealogy is not one of every one of Adam's posterity, but rather is a genealogy of the children of God, of those who were born again. It's like our church records. We don't record everyone who was born in Arizona or Utah. We keep a record of those who have come into the church as sons and daughters of Christ, he says. And this was the book of the generations of Adam. And it talks about Adam and Seth and Enos and Canaan, Mahalalel, and fills in a little of a detailed history. It goes on and talks about Methuselah and Enoch, and gives us quite a bit of information on Enoch and what he did, and how he built the holy order up in his day, by which his people were translated. It goes on then to Methuselah and to Lamech and to Noah, and that's where the book of Moses closes. But it's a history of the people in that day. We need, in one of the future sessions, to talk about the Council of Adam-on-Diamond. There's a lot more that we need to understand about it in order to see things clearly. If we had the time, we'll go back to that. But I need to leave it for the present time. The blessings that these people received by reason of building up the holy order. Keep in mind that President Benson said from that article I read of his on what he would like us to teach our children about the temple. He indicates that the temple is the way by which you bring your children and yourself back into God's presence. Then one who did this most successfully in the antediluvian period was the patriarch Enoch. And what blessing did he receive? Well, you turn over to Moses 7 and read what he says from verse 17 on through to about verse 19, and you'll begin to see the blessings that are realized when people get out of their lethargy and seriously take the gospel into its true light, understand it and apply it, and get to the temple and begin to sanctify their lives and feel the power of the Spirit in their lives as a result of it. He says that the Lord came and dwelt with these people. Now the Lord is going to do that with the Latter-day Saints, those who are worthy at least. It'll be a small remnant. Isaiah talks about a tenth after the cleansing who will be worthy. That ought to put us all on guard. That ought to cause us all to awaken, because when we get through the cleansing of Zion in the latter days, of those that remain, there will only be a tenth who will finally be where they ought to be spiritually, out of the membership of the church. That's what Isaiah says. He says it over and over again. All through the book of Isaiah, he comes back and dwells on that and tells how glorious and beautiful that branch of the Lord, the tenth, will be when they get back to some of these blessings. But in Enoch's day, the Lord came down and dwelt with them, and they dwelt in righteousness. That's one of the fruits of doing what you're talking about today.
what we're talking about today. He says, the fear of the Lord was upon all nations, so great were the glories of the Lord, which was upon his people. And the Lord blessed the land, and they were blessed upon the mountains and upon the high places, and did flourish, and they got a little rain in snowflake when that happened. And the Lord called his people Zion, because they were of one heart and one mind, and dwelt in righteousness. And there were no poor among them, and they were called the city of holiness, even Zion. That's part of the blessing that came as a result of this. It was on that basis then, when they got to the foundation, then they went further and got the blessing to be translated and taken into a terrestrial state. Here's how the prophet Joseph Smith explained that in the teachings, page 170. He is speaking of the priesthood and says, now the doctrine of translation is a power which belongs to this priesthood. There are many things which belong to the power of the priesthood and the keys thereof, that have been kept hid from before the foundation of the world. They are hid from the wise and the prudent, to be revealed in the last times. Then he goes on and talks about that. Another great statement on that is here in the inspired revision of the Bible. I think we have it in our modern scriptures. If you want to turn to it, it's Genesis 14. But here he's talking of the oath and covenant of the Lord to Enoch and to Noah. And then in verse 32, he makes this clarification. And men having this faith coming up unto this order of God, and he's speaking of the holy order, were translated and taken into heaven. They were prepared to return back to God's presence. As we've said, Abraham sought to receive these blessings, and this is essentially the core of the great drama of Abraham's life. He sought for the blessings of the fathers, and the Lord put him through the refining process. As the prophet Joseph Smith made it clear, when the Lord requires him to offer his son Isaac as a sacrifice, it was that final preparation by which Abraham finally qualified to receive not just the fullness of the priesthood and the holy order, but the keys of that. This is what the prophet Joseph taught. In the offering of sacrifice, it wasn't just the offering of his son, first of all. It was a very heinous thing for Abraham. He himself was almost a victim of human sacrifice. He was strapped to an iron bedstead, and it took an angel of the Lord to deliver him. His father turned to idolatry and apparently consented in that kind of junk. Then Abraham had to flee. He went through idolatrous people and kept himself free from that. And then for the Lord to come around and say, Abraham, you do the same thing to Isaac. First of all, that of itself, with his background experience, was the most devastating thing you could require of him. Then, in addition to that, you have to look at the issue in regards to what was Isaac. Isaac was more than his son. Isaac was the heir. Isaac was the one through who these promises that were given to Abraham would be fulfilled. Without Isaac, there would be no promises. So what the Lord required of Abraham was that he simply give back everything that he had received and have faith merely to obey and put his son on the altar and drive the dagger through his heart and terminate not only his son's life, but also terminate the promise that God had given to him in regards to his choice posterity. That's what was required. When Abraham met that test and that challenge, then Joseph Smith said he was given the keys that he sought for. Then he finally came up and received what Joseph Smith calls the keys of the kingdom of everlasting lives. The prophet, in speaking of that, indicates that if a man would attain these keys, then he has to sacrifice all things. That doesn't mean that Abraham was given the responsibility to sacrifice everything that he had, but it took the only thing that really meant anything to him in his life. At times, the Lord does that. He says, teachings page 322, the sacrifice required of Abraham in the offering of Isaac shows that if a man would attain the keys of the kingdom of endless lives, he must sacrifice all things. That's the issue. When we come down to Moses, then, I'm going to have to hurry on and speak right fast past this point on. Moses endeavored to establish the same program, but the Israelites rejected it. This program, as President Benson points out, is the program by which we return to God's presence. Here's how the prophet Joseph explains it in Teachings, page 180. Answer to the question, was the priesthood of Melchizedek taken away from when Moses died? All priesthood is Melchizedek, but there are different portions or degrees of it. That portion which brought Moses to speak with God face to face was taken away, but that which brought the ministering of angels remained. Then as special appointments within the latter framework, all prophets like Daniel and Ezekiel and Isaiah had the Melchizedek priesthood, as Daniel and Ezekiel and Isaiah had the Melchizedek priesthood as individuals, not the people generally, but the prophets, and were ordained by God himself. An interesting statement is found in the book of Exodus, chapter 34 of the Inspired Revision. This is the one that President Benson quoted in his talk that we began this hour with. It deals with the episode of an ancient Israel at Mount Sinai when they rejected the higher law, and when the Lord then gave them the lesser law, here in Exodus 34:1. And the Lord said unto Moses, Hew thee 2 other tablets of stone like unto the first, and I will write upon them also the words of the law, according as they were written at the first on the tablets which thou breakest. But it shall not be according to the first, for I will take away the priesthood out of their midst, therefore my holy order and the ordinances thereof. He is talking about the temple and the higher program. Shall not go before them, for my presence shall not go up in their midst, lest I destroy them. The inference is that if you have the order that he is speaking of here and the ordinances, you will have his presence. You will have him with you as a people, right? He says, but I will give unto them the law as at the first, but it shall be after the law of carnal commandments. For I have sworn in my wrath that they shall not enter into my presence in my rest in the day of their pilgrimage. Therefore, do as I have commanded, etc. Moses endeavored to bring the people into this relationship. In section 84, there is one of the choice statements of all religious literature that deals with Mount Sinai scene and what they did and what they didn't do. It indicates where they are talking about the holy order of God, verse 18. And the Lord confirmed a priesthood also upon Aaron and his seed through all the generations, which priesthood also continueth and abideth forever, with the priesthood which is after the holiest order of God. And this greater priesthood, this latter, the one after the holy order of God, administreth the gospel and holdeth the keys of the mysteries of the kingdom, even the keys of the knowledge of God. And that's not theological knowledge. That's the knowledge you get when, like Moses, you talk with God face to face. This priesthood holds the keys to that program, as President Benson says, by which we come back into God's presence. He says, therefore, in the ordinances thereof, the powers of godliness is manifest. And without the ordinances there, merely by getting a remission of sins, the celestial world gets a remission of sins. The terrestrial world gets a remission of sins. And they are those who are not valiant in the testimony of Jesus, which includes a lot of Latter-day Saints. You become exalted by getting a remission of sins as the preparatory gospel, and then receive grace for grace until ultimately, having grown in spiritual power and attributes to another, on the day of resurrection, God centers in you a fullness of his glory. You have light and intelligence and power centered in you and would eclipse the light of sun at noonday. And you have a loving marriage relationship with a similar endowed spouse. And this then is eternal lives and lives in the sacred name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Question and answers. Question, did Adam help in the creation? Answer, you bet he did. You bet. Question, You said Adam is the Son of God. Do you mean physically? Answer, absolutely. Question, if so, what about the statement that Christ is the only begotten in the flesh? Answer, we're talking in this term only begotten in the flesh within the context of the fall. Question, is Adam our spiritual brother? Did our heavenly parents begot physical children to populate worlds? Adam and Eve then there are two different processes of procreation. One to produce spirits and the other to produce physical children. Answer, well, it's all done through the marriage union and the marriage relationship, but a resurrected celestial being has the power to beget spirit children. Then our Father in heaven begot Christ, etc. You've got the physical attributes in there. Men, for example, like Heber C. Kimball, Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, and others taught this. Question, if there are many worlds just like this one and gods, why is Jesus Christ the only begotten Son? Answer, the term only begotten doesn't just mean in the flesh. Christ was the only begotten a long, long while before he came into mortality. Let me show you in that script spiritually. If you're going to the first chapter of Moses and you read the encounter that Moses had with Lucifer, Moses is told he is in similitude of mine only begotten. He is told that you are in similitude of him and he's there and you're like him. That's not something of the future. Then Moses says, he also gave me commandment when he called upon me out of the burning bush, saying, call upon God in the name of mine only begotten and worship me. Satan gets irate, and in verse 19, and now when Moses had said these words, Satan cried with a loud voice and ran upon the earth and commanded, saying, I am the only begotten, not I'm going to be, I am. Let me explain it this way. There is more than one kind of life in the plan of life. Those living powers that lead to glory are powers of life. We get them through rebirth and we enter into a newness of life. We could acquire them before we were born and develop in them before we were born as spirits. In the divine plan of things, Christ as the firstborn became the only begotten way back there when the Father then appointed him, knowing that he would live in perfection necessary to achieve the full end result, appointing him to be the being in whom he would first center his light and truth and glory. And then from Christ we will get truth and light and glory hence. Jesus is the light and the life of the world. He is the beginning and the end. The priesthood, for example, is the priesthood after the order of the Son of God. Christ's priesthood is the order of his Father. But all priesthood powers, all gospel powers, all powers of truth were centered in Christ. He was the Son of God and the only Son in these various realms. And as such, he is the only begotten. When he came to earth, then John said, we saw his glory as the glory of the only begotten. That being who was the only begotten came and became the only begotten in the flesh and continues his primary role as the only begotten in the sense that he was the light and life of the world. That term only begotten is broader than we think. And when you talk about that and apply that here, you need to understand that, rather than draw too narrow a conclusion from too narrow a base of thought, etc. Question. If the body looks like the spirit and the bounds of our habitation were planned in the council of heaven, how could those genetics be changed when a couple chooses not to have their allotment of children and those spirits are given to another? Answer, well, the point is, the fact of lives are there. There is agency as to what parental program we are going to have in mortality. And if one cancels out, then their agency, etc., that's done. And this is where the modification of plan comes in. The fact is, you don't look like you otherwise would have looked. You don't. That's all there is to it. I have 3 adopted sons. Some people say, oh, Brother Andrus, They don't look like you. I say, well, they've all got different mothers. Oh, Brother Andrus, what's been going on? But the point is, I've been told through the channels of revelation and priesthood prayer that they were programmed to be my sons in pre-earth life, but they couldn't make it that way, so they came down another way. Now they look differently than what they would otherwise have looked. I would have like them to look more like my wife, but they're different. But that's the fact of life. Genetically, they're different. But in pre-earth life, they were foreordained to be our sons, and they look different. Of rebellion and pride and arrogance and perversion and distortion as contrasted to Lucifer, which is the son of morning.